So in this video, we're going to be graphing functions that do include shifts. So we are going to be doing steps 2 and 3 in this progression. So we're going to start with this example. Y equals 2 plus 3 sine x. So our first step is always to identify amplitude, period, shifts, etc. So here, my amplitude is 3, the number in front of sine. My period and period always equals 2 pi over b. So b is the number in front of x. Since there's nothing there, that means it's 1. So period equals 2 pi over 1, which is just 2 pi. And then we have a shift here. So because of this plus 2, even though it's in the front, it still qualifies as a shift. So anytime we have a plus, that means there is some type of shift up, down, left, or right. So because this is not inside parentheses, it is a vertical shift. So VS. And even though it looks like it says plus 3, 3 is the amplitude, and we're really adding on this 2 to this function. So this is a shift up 2. So don't get confused when it's in front. The number in front is the shift, not this number, because this number we know is used for amplitude. Okay, so let's go to our list of steps. If there is a vertical shift, which we have, draw a new x-axis. So what do I mean by that? Well, here is my x-axis. If we shift up 2, that means this x-axis where we commonly would draw our zeros is going to shift up 2 spots. And I'm going to draw just a little dotted line to signify that, okay, now this is where I'm going to put my 0 points. This is going to be the middle of my graph. So now we're going to follow through as normal. We don't have a horizontal shift, so we skipped step 3. So skip step 4. Divide the period by 4 to get the first number of your x-axis. So if we divide 2 pi by 4, that will give us our scale. So our scale is pi over 2. So pi over 2 is going to be what I label my x-axis with. So I'm still going to label it on the regular x-axis here. This is just going to be used when we graph. So this is 1 pi over 2. This is 2 pi over 2, which everyone knows 2 pi over 2 is just equal to pi. So we'll write it as pi. This is 3 pi over 2. And this is 4 pi over 2, which is 2 pi. So keep in mind, your last value should always match up with the period. So now we're going to go through and actually graph the function. I'm going to graph it in a dark blue. Oh, actually, wait, we are missing one last step. Use amplitude to label the y-axis. So this is where the asterisk is going to come in handy, because since we are shifting up, so our amplitude is 3. So if I went up 1, 2, 3, we are shifting up an additional 2. So really, I want to count 3 up from my dotted line. So 1, 2, 3, that is going to be where I draw my asterisk. So that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So make sure you label. And then when I go down 3 from my new x-axis, 1, 2, 3, 0 becomes my new bottom point. So the whole idea here, this should be the middle of my graph. So I should be going up 3 and then down 3 from there. I'm just going to fix my axis quick. All right, so I just fixed it here so that it would be a little bit more even. So now we want to follow our pattern. So let's go up to the top, create the pattern based on the chart below. So it is a sine function. A is positive. So we're going to follow x-intercept max, x-intercept min, x-intercept. So when I say x-intercept now, normally this is an x-intercept right along my x-axis. But when I graph this x-intercept, we have to graph it up 2. So 1, 2. So that's why we have this dotted line. It helps us figure out where the new x-intercept is. So then I go to a maximum point, which is where my asterisk is, then x-intercept, then minimum, and then x-intercept. So now I can graph my function. And that is one cycle of the function. So when you do problems right now, you can just do one cycle. Moving on to this example over here, we have 2 cosine x minus pi over 2. So for this one, we need to start by finding all this information. So my A is 2, my period is 2 pi because B is also 1. So A, B. And now I have minus pi over 2 inside the parentheses. So this is a horizontal shift or a phase shift. It's going to the right because it's minus pi over 2. So our next step is, it says take a vertical shift into account. We don't have one, so we're going to take our horizontal shift, our phase shift into account. So we want to draw a new y-axis now to the right, pi over 2. So if this is pi over 2, this is going to be my new y-axis. So now, instead of starting here on the y-axis, we are going to be starting here because we're shifting to the right, pi over 2. So now we need our scale. So the scale is 2 pi divided by 4, which is pi over 2. And it matches up with what we already wrote down, pi over 2. So here we're going to label 1, 2, 3, 4. I have 1 pi over 2, 2 pi over 2 is pi, 3 pi over 2, and 4 pi over 2 is 2 pi. Now I need to label my y-axis. So y-axis is based off amplitude. Go up 2 and down 2. And this, since there's no vertical shift up or down, it's just 2 and negative 2 where our asterisks are. Now I'm going to graph this. So because it is cosine and A is positive, we are going to follow that pattern up here. So cosine A is positive. We start on a max. So here my maximum point is 2 up, and actually it's not going to go on the y-axis because we have to shift to the right. So it is going to go right here. So don't forget that if you have a shift left or right, you don't start here, you start over however many your shift is. So maximum and then to 0 to minimum to 0 or intercept. 1, 2, 3, 4. Am I missing something? 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, we actually need one more line here because we are shifted over. So we have pi over 2, 2 pi over 2, 3 pi over 2, 4 pi over 2, and we're going over to 5 pi over 2. And then our last point would go here. So that's another good thing to note. You should have 5 dashes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because normally we have 5 including the y-axis. But since we shifted over 1 to the right, in order to draw our 5 critical points, we have to count over 5. So 1 pi over 2, 2, 3, 4, and then 5 pi over 2 would be our last interval. And then we connect the points. So for sake of time on this video, I'm going to skip number 7 for now. And I'm going to do number 8. So number 8 has not only a vertical shift, but also a horizontal shift. So our first step, we list out the info. So A is 2, period is 2 pi over 4, which equals pi over 2. We have a vertical shift up 2 because of this. And we have a phase shift to the right. This is going to the right, pi over 4. So don't forget that when you have a number in front of x, you have to divide it by your c value for your phase shift. So we need to create a new x-axis and a new y-axis. So first we are shifting up 2. So there's my new x, and we're shifting to the right, pi over 4. Okay. So now when we go through and get the scale, we take period, pi over 2, divide that by 4. So we end up getting pi over 8. So pi over 8, where does that play into this? Well, if this is pi over 4, pi over 8 is less than that. So this right here is pi over 8. And then this is 2 pi over 8. And then we have 3 pi over 8 and 4 pi over 8, which is pi over 2. And then we have 5 pi over 8. And then we have 6 pi over 8, which is 3 pi over 4. And now let's count. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you always want to count 5 points starting at your new y-axis. So you keep going until you have the 5 intervals. Now when we do our y-axis, we want to go up 2. So up 2, 1, 2, 3, this would be 4. That would be my top, and then down to 0 would be my bottom. Okay, so now when we go to plot this, plot it in green. It's a cosine value with a positive a, so that means we start on a maximum. So you're starting right here where your asterisk is and along the new y-axis. Then you go over one more for your new x-intercept, and then your minimum where the asterisk is, and then your x-intercept, and then your maximum. You connect the points, and you're done with one cycle. So drawing these dotted lines is optional. These asterisks are optional, but I like to do it because then when I draw my curve, I don't have to think about it as much. I just line it up. All right, I'm starting here. My maximum point is at this top asterisk. My new x-intercept is up, instead of thinking, all right, x-intercept is here, we have to shift it up too. So it just, it makes your life a little bit easier. And that's pretty much it with shifts.